Obviously, being consistently mentioned as one of the top potential landing destinations for quarterback transfer Jake Retzlaff is extremely intriguing. However, if you ask me, I would rather just run it back again to 2013.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things cowboy and cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with your first $5 winner. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get squared away today. Meanwhile, we get started into the foosball conversation that is obviously quarterbacks. And the last episode was to kind of set up this episode of Jake Retzlaff. He would be a good addition to almost every team in the United States of America, no questions asked. However, if you looked at the Garrett Rangel versus Retzlaff matchup this previous season, I think we could all see that Garrett Rangel actually got the better of Jake. And the coaches strongly felt like Zane Flores' upside was too much to pass up on. They obviously felt like the versatility and the speed of Hauss Hejny is too much to pass up on. Therefore, we enter this season with Hauss Hejny and Zane Flores potentially competing for that QB1 position. However, why not run this back to 2013 and to some degree even 2012 with the JW Walsh and Clint Chelf show? That is exactly how I envision this season going. And if we go back down memory lane in 2012, the Cowboys ended up going 8-5, which might be somewhat reminiscent of this upcoming football season. However, if we get comparable production out of these individuals, Zane Flores and Hauss Hejny, I think it could be a mirror image of 2013 where we went 10-3. Of course, 2012, 8-5. JW Walsh had 109 completions for 1,564 yards. Clint Chelf had 119 completions for 1,588 yards for 15 touchdowns. Collectively, they threw for almost 3,200 yards, 3,152, and 28 touchdowns. The very next year, we went from 8-5 to 10-3 with the same group, the same crew. JW Walsh, 113 completions for 1,333 yards, 9 touchdowns. Clint Chelf, 164 completions, 2,169 yards, 17 touchdowns, bringing the total to 3,502 with 26 TDs. We also had a lot of help in the run game, and I think we're going to be able to get that this upcoming season as well. We also had a lot of ability on the outside as wide receiver core. I think we're definitely going to have that as well. This could set us up to be very much like the JW Walsh Clint Chelf scenario. And then I think you could also factor Banks Bowen into this equation. The downside to having mobile quarterbacks is you have a higher injury risk. When you have multiple of them, it does alleviate some of that risk to some degree. And then you have Banks Bowen in the equation, who rushed for almost 2,200 yards his high school career, coming to Tulsa, putting himself in a position to compete for a starting job. He comes to Oklahoma State because his dad, Clint, took the quarterback coach job. So instead of competing for a possible starting job at Tulsa, he came to Oklahoma State to be a reserve dude at first. He's got multiple years. That's another fun part when you go back and look at JW Walsh, Clint Chelf, coming fresh out of that 2011 Brandon Weeden, Justin Blackman, Joe Randall campaign. We were looking for JW Walsh to be a transcendent level quarterback. And to some degree, he was. You go back and look at that Florida State game. JW Walsh, Tyreek Hill, put on a show, almost got us a W with Jameis Winston, fresh off of winning a national championship. And I think that was a good indication of what that team was going to look like. Then you enter Clint Chelf into the picture, who was unheralded and realistically wasn't necessarily thought of as being a power 4 starting level quarterback. He proved everybody wrong. There's a clip the other day popped up of when we hammered number 4 in America, Baylor, and he put up 370 yards, Clint Chelf did, 3 touchdowns, and we won by like 40 some odd points. That is somewhat reminiscent of what I expect this club to be. And if you go back and look at that, part of the recruiting classes that got the JWs of the world were Doug Meacham. Doug Meacham got a good number of those dudes at TCU, obviously being part of the developmental process for Hauss Hejny, especially from the understanding what the wide receivers are trying to do. Now he brings that versatility in coaching and the knowledge that dates back to his old school Oklahoma State days, TCU days, the recruiting days. This sets us up for a remarkable season. There's an age-old adage, and even Mike Gundy has discussed it previously, that if you have two quarterbacks, you have zero. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Naturally, whenever one quarterback is building momentum and he's thriving, you want to continue to, harness that. But at the same point in time, you can effectively use a multiple quarterback system. You just have to make sure that it's done in a particular way. And you have to make sure that it's done with the utilization of other positions to help in scenarios. That's why we've gone out and got all these 6'4", 215, 225-pound wide receivers, in my opinion, to go alongside all of the speed that we have at the slot spot. And we have, 7 tight ends? That indicates to me that we're clearly going to utilize that. And what is a quarterback's favorite safety blanket? It's either the running back out of the flats or the tight end getting some separation in the middle of the field or breaking a little bit more on out routes when the quarterback's rolling out. Whether it be RPO or kind of a quick hit system, the different iterations that Doug Meacham has been a part of could look very reminiscent to the Todd level offenses. But this nonsense that Oklahoma State has no quarterbacks, I don't buy it. You know what I mean? I do think that this group is good enough to do some pretty crazy things. It just has to be facilitated. And the technical aspects that this coaching staff is bringing, the intensity, the hustle, the effort, that should be able to showcase on the field when the season kind of takes off. We've got the pieces. We've got the speed. We've got the athleticism. And I think that's going to be very visible from a quarterback position. You go back and look what Clint Chelf and JW Walsh did. They set us up for what the quarterback play should continue to be like at Oklahoma State, which is precisely why when somebody like Taylor Cornelius has a pretty successful season at Oklahoma State, it's not always viewed as successful enough until we look back a little bit more. But there is a high bar set for the quarterback play in Stillwater. And Hauss Hejny, from what I've gathered, he's just a faster, stronger version of Spencer Sanders. And Spencer Sanders obviously was a massive weapon offensively because he could change the dynamics and the numerical advantages that the defense had. Zane Flores is capable of doing that because he played RB3 in spring last season. You don't put a quarterback at running back, even if he's just a fill-in, if he can't adequately somewhat produce enough results to get the defense good looks. We know Hauss Hejny can do the thing with his legs because we saw it at TCU. We know that Zane Flores is that Mr. Nebraska, almost 9,500-yard guy that has had the development at Oklahoma State. He's been in a couple different systems now, essentially, coming into this new Doug Meacham style. That could be beneficial. The athleticism should be beneficial. And if so, this could look very reminiscent to those JW Walsh and Clint Chelf style of seasons. And that's why I'm extremely excited. Speaking of being extremely excited, you should be extremely excited about FanDuel. They're going to give you the opportunities that you're looking for, especially with the summer sports being in full swing. Whether you're about to go check out 9 innings or some free baseball under the lights, hit the golf course, hit the high-flying soccer action, FanDuel is the best way for you to make all of that happen and make it more exciting. You've already followed the action and you've had moments where you wanted to be part of the thrilling nature of it. Well, if you're in the venue, that makes it much easier. With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are out there getting sunburnt and doing whatever else. Using FanDuel allows you to track your favorite matchups. The app is going to keep it fresh with daily new promotions and fun ways to continue betting. It's easy to use, really fast payouts, and make even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Get in on the action to feel more invested no matter what it is. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because new customers right now can bet just $5 and get $150 back in bonus bet if their first $5 bet is a winner. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get started today or open the FanDuel app. It is the bee's knees for all of your betting needs, so get what you need now. Brett Yormark decided to stoke the flames at Big 12 Media Days, and I think that it's very evident by Greg Sankey posturing himself to certain levels and Kirby Smart coming out and saying that there's the two best conferences are the SEC and the Big Ten, and if you don't agree with that, then you don't follow college football, X, Y, and Z. If Brett Yormark would have stayed silent, then none of this would be a conversational piece. Now, naturally, Brett Yormark is advocating for the 5+1-1 methodology, essentially betting on the Big 12, especially in the future. Part of this 5-11 component would obviously be the 5 winning, highest rated conference champions, and then their best next 11 teams. So would it be quote unquote better right now for the Big 12 to get a 2-team guarantee with the SEC getting 14 guarantee and these other conferences getting extra guarantees and all this fun stuff? Maybe, but I appreciate the fact that he's willing to bet on the Big 12 and on himself of what the future should look like in the Big 12. And part of that is eventually having a flag bearer, right? He mentioned having teams in national contention on a year in and year out basis. Right now, the parity in the league is what makes the viewership so enticing. But at some point in time, eventually we're going to have a team that is constantly talked about as a component to the national championship picture or the CFP, big picture. Oklahoma State easily should be that brand, in my opinion. Other teams are going to have an argument to that as well. But nonetheless, I'm appreciative of what Brett Yormark is trying to do. I'm appreciative of the fact that Brett Yormark is willing to essentially stick his neck out there. So we'll hit a couple quotes from Brett Yormark, and one of these being the biggest one I wanted to cover is he said, "I fully expect the Big 12 to earn multiple college football playoff bids this season and to show once again we can compete with anybody. Speaking of the CFP, we continue to believe in this 5-11 model proposed by the Big 12 and the ACC. It is the right playoff model for college football. We want to earn it on the field. We do not need a professional model because we are not the NFL. We are college football. We must act like it." I think this is dead on. He believes that we're the deepest conference in America. No league offers more of a competitive balance. He's 100% right. As for the two teams getting in thing, to be realistic with you, when he first said that, I said that's not going to happen. Right? Of course, you extend it, and that does make it much more manageable. And in the extended 16 playoff or 16 team format, BYU would have likely got in this previous season alongside Arizona State. We could all make the argument that as the season progressed, Baylor got really hot, but not quite as hot as BYU. Yeah, they had some games go their way, like the Oklahoma State game, but you are going to require some level of luck to be very successful throughout the course of the season. And I didn't think getting two teams in was likely because I didn't think they were going to allow it to happen. Right? There's clearly a squeeze happening, and teams feel like that the ACC and the Big 12, one of them is about to be part of the next squeeze, and that might be viable. But Brett Yormark is a visionary. When people kind of gave Brett Yormark a hard time for the gimmicky, quote-unquote, nature of the third-party private equity and the potential naming rights, people thought it was cutesy-tootsy, and they were giving him a hard time for it. Now, what are you seeing? You're seeing other conferences have these conversations and at least deliberate on whether it's going to be advantageous for them to do it. So the same people poking fun are now the people admitting that this is probably a good idea. You've got other universities trying to do some of, the logo stuff to help with profitability and NIL. These are a lot of things that Brett Yormark brought to the forefront. The concerts at halftime for all of the conference championships, that was Brett Yormark. Having investments from things like the WWE, that was Brett Yormark. The third-party partnership proprietary. That was Brett Yormark. The naming rights stuff and putting stuff on the field and jerseys, that was Brett Yormark. So I have faith that Brett Yormark probably has a pretty good read on what's going to happen. He did mention Baylor former AD, Mac Rhodes, being an integral part of the Big 12's ascension and him giving honest feedback. I think that's great. And I agree. I think what Cody Campbell's potentially not only doing at Texas Tech, but trying to help the NCAA, I think that's good for the Big 12. I think that's good for Brett Yormark. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, we probably would get 2 teams in. Would they try to make it difficult for that to happen? Yeah, probably. But initially, when he said the goal is to have multiple teams in, I thought that the powers that be that clearly don't think that the Big 12 should be on the same level weren't going to allow it to happen. And this is all spurned because some people were huffing and puffing and whining and moaning about Arizona State getting a bye and that they didn't deserve a bye. And I personally think that the 5 through 9 spot where you had the on-campus was much, much, much better and should have been more coveted. But nonetheless, what was that, like $8 million for Arizona State? Good for them. And then they proved against Texas that they earned it. But several, especially SEC prognosticators, were saying that it should have never happened. They didn't earn it. They didn't deserve it. Indiana should have never been that high. SMU probably should have never even got in. Yeah, I mean, we heard all of it. So that's never going to change. The posturing, the positioning, the purposely trying to keep certain schools or representatives from conferences out is going to still happen. But with the extended format, it gives us much more viability. And I do believe when Brett Yormark indicates that over time, if there's a couple flag bearers that are always in the top 10 conversation year in and year out, that will eventually help the Big 12 even significantly more. And that will allow us to potentially talk about getting 3 teams in, maybe 4 teams in, obviously very unlikely. But this is bound and determined to shake itself out as time progresses. Right now, everyone's dealing with the NIL, the portal era, the 105 roster limitations, the multiple manipulations of the portal windows. So we're all dealing with the same thing. We all had rosters filled with the extra 6-year, 7th-year COVID dudes. All of that has taken adjustment periods, and it's going to continue to do so. But I think Brett Yormark might be on something again here. The Big 12 should expect multiple teams in. The Big 12 should expect to be able to get more than 2 teams in the near future. And in order for that to be plausible, it's based off of this 5-11 format. Another crazy thing that Greg Sankey said, in my opinion, sparked by the Brett Yormark conversation, because he got to have the mic first. Obviously, he took advantage of it. Yeah, but that comment about how there's not anybody in the country that would swap schedules with any SEC team, that is blatantly false. And I'm glad that they're kind of getting raked over the coals to some degree for it, because everybody in the Big 12 would like to play the Citadel or the deaf and mute school in week 10, like the SEC does, because let's not play games. That is nothing more than an opportunity to give the starters rest and let the backups go win a game that they should probably win without any of the starters. So it's an extra bye week. That's what it is. That's all it is. So yes, the Big 12 would rather play 8 conference games and then have a fluffy, nonsensical game at the end of the season to give more recovery time. I mean, imagine if you have a bye week, then you play a game, and then you have this Citadel game. You essentially have 2 bye weeks. I'm not trying to knock the Citadel. It could be Valdosta State or enter whatever school name. But at the end of the day, the Big 12 has to kick the door down. They have to make a name for themselves. You've got to have TCU perform better in the national championship. You've got to have Arizona State take down Texas in that game instead of talking about what TCU did against Michigan or how, Texas should have lost that game. We've got to kick the door down. But the scheduling, the Big 12 is the only conference where every single week, whether you're playing number 15, 14, 16, 2, 3, 1, anybody can essentially beat anybody. But I don't think that's going to last, right? I don't think that this is going to last forever. Not every Power 4 school can afford the rev share numbers. Not every school in the country is going to be able to balance out their roster of 105 dudes appropriately. Not every school is going to be able to isolate some of the deficiencies they have in NIL or recruiting. And that creates a power vacuum at that place, which could create new job opportunities, which could create more chaos. And so amongst all of the chaos, eventually some of this is going to work itself back out. And when that's the case, the Big 12 absolutely would love 4 or 5 gimme games. I mean, that would be great. I don't know why it's so hard for the SEC and Big 10 to admit that the bottom half of their leagues are not on the same playing field as the bottom half of the Big 12. They're not. And, you know, if you did like a 5th place game versus a 5th place game, would Texas Tech beat or Kansas State beat Mississippi State this last season? Yeah, absolutely. Probably would have definitely happened. So the validity from Brett Yormark here is a breath of fresh air. Once again, I think he's right. I think this is the right stance to take. We don't want to be limited to 2 schools ever because it's unnecessary. Maybe now it would be beneficial, but what about 3 years from now, 4 years from now? I appreciate that Brett Yormark is trying to set the Big 12 up for the long run because Bob Bowlesby and BB, they didn't do that. They were trying to just keep things afloat instead of looking towards the future. Now, Brett Yormark does need to get better at scheduling. He does need to get better at capitalization. Like whenever you say we're going to do the third-party proprietary, buy-in, essentially, and we might do the naming rights and be the Dr. Pepper Big 12 or whatever the case may be, he does need to follow through with those because right now he's giving phenomenal ideas to other conferences and we're not always capitalizing on it. So yeah, there's a couple things here and there that he could potentially refine, but overall he's been a phenomenal visionary. He can foster better scheduling here and there, but I think he's right on this one. And I actually think that he's right about getting 2 teams in. I think he's right about getting more than 2 teams in. Originally, my gut wrench reaction was they're not going to let that happen. But then we did some more digging, and it's a very viable option. What else is seemingly an option? I don't know about the viability portion of it. And this has been floated around about potentially having a trade. The hypothetical trade would be a 6-team deal between the Big 12 and the ACC that has been proposed involving West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF moving to the ACC, while the Big 12 stokes up Cal, SMU, and Stanford. No, that's pretty simple. That's a horrendous idea. Absolutely horrendous idea. And there's a lot of reasons why Cal and Stanford specifically would be terrible representatives of the Big 12. And I think they would make things more complicated in the Big 12. And we don't need complication. Texas and OU, primarily Texas, but Texas and OU did complicate things. We don't need more complication. We don't need schools on the West Coast. Like, okay, I'll give an example. During the 2020 locked in your house, wear mask time period, they wanted no part of doing anything football related. Meanwhile, the Big 12 is like, well, hold on now. We can't just completely give up living life. So we're going to continue to do some stuff. If Stanford and Cal were in the Pac-12, there would always be dissenting votes. And there could always become instances where those dissenting votes are crucial to getting things done or passed or recognition. So from that perspective, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It would be a horrendous idea, a horrendous move. SMU, maybe, possibly, but we already have a very big, good geographical footprint in Texas. We encompass a large portion of the state all the way around it. So would adding SMU be good? I don't think so. I don't think it would be good for TCU. I don't think it would necessarily be good for some of the other schools in the Big 12, but primarily, especially TCU. And they've been wonderful Big 12 members. So I don't think that would be good. I don't think it would be fair. I actually think when it comes to recruiting battles. Once this revenue share and everything gets lined out in the next few years, and some of these schools may have some difficulty heavily investing in their rosters, that'll even some things out. And that leads me to believe that none of these would be a good fit. Plus, why would you want to get rid of West Virginia? It makes no sense. I mean, that's a preposterous presentation that could be proposed. West Virginia better not go nowhere. I think they're an amazing member of the Big 12. UCF, right? They could be a budding powerhouse at some point in time. They've got the base of alumni. They've got the financial abilities. They've got the geographical location. They're in a recruiting hotbed. Scott Frost did lead them to an undefeated season. I think it's going to take them some time to get it going, but it's very possible. Cincinnati, yeah. Since Luke Fickell left, things haven't quite been the same, but they seem to be getting better. I think Sorsby was a good addition at times. He had magical moments. At times he looked a little bit down, but then you also got to look at basketball. They're a tradition-rich basketball school, struggling to some degree right now, but being in the Big 12 should help. Baseball, they've been a really good representative of the Big 12 in the last couple of years, and I think even this previous season more so. So Cincinnati does bring things to the table, but I don't want to take them away because they're a geographical partner for West Virginia, for UCF. So if there's going to be any ACC conversations about the Big 12, it needs to be about what teams in the ACC could potentially come to the Big 12, not this proposition. And I don't recall how this proposition came to be, but obviously, it was a trending thing recently. So I wanted to cover it because to me, it's completely asinine to even explore this possibility. If anything, we need to give Cincinnati, UCF, and West Virginia another partner or two for travel purposes and to help alleviate some of the financial constraints that come with traveling all over the country in a multitude of sports. I hate it. I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's completely nonsensical, and I don't think it's ever going to happen because I would assume that the Big 12 thinks likewise. Stanford and Cal would be horrendous in the Big 12. They would just be problematic. And SMU, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you with geographical footprint. It doesn't necessarily help you in recruiting. If anything, over time, as the money starts to dissipate a little bit, SMU is never going to have a shortage of money likely, but it's going to even the playing field to some degree. And when that happens, SMU, they might be the king of the ACC by then, maybe. But what does that look like? We know Clemson, Florida State, they're getting benefited right now. But what about the other teams? What about when the contract needs to be renewed, which is coming up here in a couple of years or maybe even less than that? There doesn't need to be a trade proposition, in my opinion. There might need to be an acquisition proposition, but I don't think most anybody in the Big 12 would even contemplate entertaining this as being a logical trade. And to some degree, I think you could see the same about the SEC. Does the Big 12, would we want a Vanderbilt? Probably not. Would we want a Mississippi State? Maybe, but probably not. The lower half of the SEC, the lower half of the Big Ten, it's all, not all, but it's primarily propaganda. And going back to that comment about nobody in the country would swap with any of the Big 12 teams on schedule, that's just a bold-faced lie. And either they know it's a lie or they just don't know how to read the room. We would absolutely welcome having 8 conference games and 1 fluffy stuff game because it helps us get healthy. It helps us get right, which is precisely why the SEC does it. So, yeah, we would take it. Is that what's best for the competitive level of each conference? No, probably not. Every conference should be playing the same number of conference games, whether it's 8, 9, whatever. If everybody should go, the SEC, make sure you get a Week 10 fluffy stuff game in there, then so be it. But make it uniform. Make it understandable. Anyhow, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. You know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Like it, hit the stars, leave the reviews, do what you do.